This is really just an overview of what's in the survey and what some of our proposals are and the kinds of questions that we want you to provide us some guidance on. So if you go to the next slide, Adam. So we've been working on this, the draft up to this date. If you participated in the resident outreach survey, it was completed by over 900 people. We've incorporated those comments. We had workshops with about 10 user groups, and we did some detailed park field assessments, and we've done projections of what we think your recreation demands are going to be from now to 2050. We've included two types of proposals for your evaluation tonight. We have some regional open space and trails proposals, as well as specific ideas for each Benton County park. So with that, at the end of the survey that you can access once this is done, if you'll put your name and email in, we'll make sure that you're kept informed, and we'll include you in a lottery drawing for a $250 gift certificate, which we've also done with the results of the outreach survey. So next slide, please. These are the regional proposals for wildlife habitat and open space. As you can see in the graphic, we want to try to preserve the ridge lines and some of the critical downslopes that kind of backstop your urban development areas. So number one is the Horse Heaven. Number two are the ridge lines behind Kennewick that extend all the way down to Wallula Gap. Number three runs from Little Badger clear to McDonald Ridge and clear to Wannawich Dam. And number four is Goose Hills. So our questions are whether you think it's a priority to preserve the habitat and possibly the viewscapes of those four areas. Go to the next slide, please. These are the questions that are presented in the survey. We want you to rank from lowest to highest on each of these. So as you can see, the first one is the Horse Heaven Hills. Number two are the ridge lines behind Kennewick. Number three are Little Badger to McDonald Ridge, and the last is the DNR or Goose Hill. Next, please. The second regional proposal is for multi-use trails. The graphic has three colors in it. The yellow are existing trail systems, existing trail routes that have been improved or have been designated. The red trails are proposals that we think should be added to make connections between those and connections in and out of the cities. The blue lines are canals, and there are two particular canals that we're interested in that could provide access, as you can see, from west to east through the urban areas and from Horse Heaven to Wallula Gap. So the first one, number one on the chart, is to extend Horse Heaven east and west. Number two is to use the KID Canal from Horse Heaven, as I said, to Hoover Park on Wallula Gap. Number three is to extend Little Badger Mountain clear to McDonald Ridge. Number four is to extend a connection from that trail through Benton City and to Horse Heaven. Number five is to use the CID Canal from Wannawich Dam clear to Hoover Park and then to Wallula Gap. Number six is to make the connection between two rivers and the CID and HID canals. Number seven is to connect to Jump Off Joe. Number eight is to connect to Wallula Gap from Hoover Park. Number nine is to extend the Rattlesnake Ridge Slope north to the Columbia River. Number 10 is to connect Richland's Riverfront Trail to number 5, CID Canal. Number 11 is to complete the Columbia Plateau State Park Trail into Sacagawea and then across the bridge into McNairy Refuge. And number 12 is to connect the dunes, Juniper Dunes areas to the Plateau State Park Trail. Next slide, please. We'd like you to rate all 12 of those proposals from the lowest to highest And note that every question we ask down at the very bottom is another category where you can tell us whatever comments you want to make on those 12 proposals or any other proposals you think should be considered in this regional trail network. Next, please. These are the Benton County parks. As you can see, they work from left to right, and they're fairly well distributed across the county. We'll cover each of those parks except Rattlesnake Mountain Shooting Facility, which is muted. And the reason is they developed their own master plan and they coordinate that with the county commissioners. So we're not identifying proposals outside of their master planning process. You can see that some of these parks are at the edges of the urban development area, and some of them are completely within the urban area to be master plan. Next slide, please. This is Badger Mountain. We have 4 proposals for you to consider in Badger Mountain. Number 1 is to complete the Orchard Wedge, preserve it. Number 2 is to preserve the downhill slopes on the northeast corner. Number 3 is to preserve the ridge lines to the north. Next slide, please. These are our 3 questions. Again, rate from lowest to highest and give us any other comments that you want at the bottom of that question format. This is Candy Mountain Preserve. We have 5 questions for this particular park. 1 is to connect Candy and Badger Mountain using Dallas Road. Number 2 is develop another trailhead at the water tower site. Number 3 is to preserve kind of the missing gap you can see there just above the trailhead. Number 4 is to resolve the long-term use of the potential water tank site that the city holds. And number 5 is to extend the trail network so that it goes to Red Mountain. Next slide, please. You can see the 5 questions again, lowest to highest, with the ability to give us comments at the bottom. Next slide, please. This is Horn Rapids Park. On the left is the image of most of the park from north to south, and on the right is a blow-up of the area of the developed portions of the park that extend to Wannawish Dam. The first proposal, number 1, by Wannawish Dam, is to install buoys, better signage, mandatory pullouts before any craft, particularly paddle craft or tubers, reach the dam, and the portage around the dam. Number 2 would be to continue to preserve the natural areas that exist along the riverfront. Number 3 would be to consolidate the green grass areas and the RV park into a major activity zone, which could hold festivals and even day-long festivals, and weekend festivals, if that is, for things like bluegrass, music, or other major events which would not be necessarily a good use in a park within a more developed urban area. Number 4 would be to add a stage so that would support that kind of activity. And number 5 would be to possibly enter into a joint venture development agreement to create a new RV park that had more capacity, able to handle bigger rigs, pull-through capabilities with water, power, Wi-Fi, and other amenities. Next slide, please. So you can see those are our 5 questions, lowest to highest, and again, another comment section. Next slide, please. Now, by the way, I've not been describing what each of these parks are. At the bottom of this slide, you can see that we've written it out more or less, but as you take the survey, this description will give you a clue for what is in each of these parks so you can kind of get up to speed. As well, in the survey, there's an interactive map so you can locate each of these parks, zoom in from the larger urban area right down to this level of view so you can kind of orient yourself to how those parks are distributed. The 2 things we want to propose with Horse Heaven Cemetery is, number 1, to erect a monument that identifies every person that's buried in the cemetery that we know of. So we don't necessarily know where they are, but we do know that they're somehow buried in the cemetery and we think they should be recognized. Number 2 would be to do a ground level, below ground radar to see just how many burials are actually in the cemetery and where they are located. So we can install effective protection of those sites and recognize just exactly how many people should be recognized for being in this particular place. Next slide, please. Those are our two questions, lowest to highest, with the ability to provide any other comments that you wish. Next slide, please. This is Horse Heaven Vista Park. It's located close to Prosser on the rim. The two proposals here, as you can see, number one is the former road or the historical road. And while there's a shelter and a viewpoint in the white concrete pathways, we think that the lower road should also just at least have a plaque and identify what the original route was, what kind of vehicles used it, and what its historical significance would be. Number two is the restroom. It's a holding tank restroom located on that property. And at this particular time, it's a subject of graffiti and other kinds of hazards. So we want to develop a program. Ideally, the more use we could generate for this site, it'd be easier to control those types of things in the future. And if you look at the regional trail proposals, this could be a trailhead for a trail that would run from this site towards Benton City, and then further west to the grade. Next slide, please. These are the two questions, lowest to highest, with the ability to give us other comments. Next slide, please. This is Hoover Park. And in some respects, we think it's a really undeveloped at the present time, but has a lot of potential capability. We have 9 things for you to give us some comments on for this particular park site. Now you can see the boundaries of the park property, and it's really Corps of Engineers property that's leased to Benton County, do not extend clear to the north where the number 1 is. Number 1 is an at-grade railroad crossing to access the east side, and it runs through private property before it enters the Corps' property. That access is protected by an agreement with the Corps. But our first question would be, we need some kind of safety controls on that railroad crossing, because the number of trains is increasing, their length is increasing, and their speed is increasing. So if we're to make good, effective use, safe use of the east side, we need appropriate safety guards and so on activated at that site. And that would affect whatever else we can really do with the east portion of the site. The second proposal would be to recognize the historic railroad grade. There's a trough that runs through the site. You can see some visibility of that from where the railroad used to be. And if you see the blue line, that's the portions of the railroad that are submerged, but very visible if you're on the banks and you can look down at it. So our proposal is to provide appropriate signage, some landscaping and accent, and particularly extend a pier out of the water over a portion of that grade. There's another number 2 on the west side of the park, and that's where some of the remnants of the buildings from Hoover Park are located. We'd like to give them similar interpretive treatment. Number 3 would be to install a wading and swimming beach within that protected alcove. Number 4 would be to put in a boat launch ramp on the east side of the submerged railroad grade. Number 5 will be to put in a hand carry launch and water trail campsite just for water trail use. Number 6 would be to install picnic tables all along the shoreline. And by the way, those yellow kind of trail markings are what's actually being used on that site. So in a lot of respects, we're respecting what people have kind of pioneered themselves. Moving to the west side, which cannot cross the railroad tracks because it's in a protected depression through the rest of the site, it has to be accessed from Hoover Road. But there's a irrigation ditch, which is shown in blue, which runs from west to east and empties into that protected water feature shown on the west side of the railroad tracks. That water feature does not drain into the river. It's kind of a captive water body. So water quality is a serious issue with it. Right now we have kind of unauthorized vehicles driving in and out of that drainage ditch, which we would like to control and provide a bridge at number 7 which would allow people to be able to access both sides without contaminating the water. Number 8, on the lower south and upper north of that side of the park are kind of informally used by a variety of groups. We would like some of those user groups to come forward and take responsibility for what their activities would be, enter into stewardship agreements with the county as to what could be done there, who would operate it, and who would maintain it. There are a variety of ideas that we have of what those could be, but we'd also like to see what some of your ideas are. Number 9 is to extend a trail along that irrigation ditch to the KID canal and then on the ridge lines further west. Next slide, please. Those are the 9 questions, lowest to highest, with the ability to give us some comments in the box at the bottom. Next slide, please. This is Two Rivers Park, one of the most popular and heavily used parks in the Tri-Cities area. The things we propose to do here are in some respects just kind of remedial, catching up with some of the demand and use activities on the site, and we'll raise a couple of new questions at the same time. Number 1 is to upgrade the trail along a riverfront that would end in the overlook that looks onto the largest lagoon. Number 2 will be to connect the park to Kennewick with the trail that exists right now on top of the levee. Number 3 would be to remove the single wide trail that is used for maintenance and reorganize that function within the park. Number 4 is the parcel that the Corps also owns across the roadway. And the question is to conduct a public planning process to determine what would be the best use of that parcel. It could be community gardens, it could be parking, it could be other activities. So we look forward to what your suggestions are on that and whether or not we should conduct a public planning process for that piece. These are the 4 questions, lowest to highest, with the ability to give us some open-ended comments. Next slide, please. This is Vista Park. This is in the very center of Kennewick in the unincorporated area. It was developed by the Vista Junior Women's Club in 1970. We have 2 questions on this park. Number 1 would be, there's only 1 picnic table on that site. Should we increase the picnicking capacity with more tables and maybe a shelter? And number 2, the playground is a little dated. It needs to be brought up to safety codes and made ADA accessible. Next slide, please. Those are the 2 questions, lowest to highest, and the ability to give us other comments. Next slide, please. This is a Wallula Gap Preserve. Outlined in yellow are 4 parcels. These are parcels that the National Park Services gave to the county or transferred to the county, although the county has to report about every 5 years to the National Park Service how they're being protected and how they're being preserved. They're national natural landmark status. But those 4 individual parcels along a river are not connected, either by land or by trails. The yellow trail they see up on the plateau is an informal trail on private property. So we have 2 questions. Number 1, should we somehow create a riverfront trail that connects these 2? And number 2, should we take actions to try to preserve the top of the plateau and trail access up and down the plateau and down to the river? Next slide, please. The 2 questions, lowest to highest, with the ability to give us some other comments. Now, our open house survey, this is the link to the survey, It was emailed to you today. It's in English and Spanish. It includes exactly the same questions that we just covered. It includes the same kind of graphics and park descriptions that we just covered. We really want you to give us your feedback on that survey. The more people that can complete it, the more accurate and usable it will be to us. So once we're done with this presentation and the questions that you may have submitted on chat, we'd like you to go to that right after this presentation or whenever you can to give us your input. Adam, did you have anybody submit chat questions?
I did. I have I have a couple of questions that came in, so I'll deal with those. I figured it was best to stop trying to keep up typing with them. And then maybe just a couple of other comments real quick. So one question was in regards to the planned parking area at Hover Park. So we were moving ahead with trying to create a new properly built parking area at Hover. A challenge that we have at Hover Park, which is owned by the Corps of Engineers, is their requirements on how we would do anything out there. And given the historical and cultural sensitivity of that property, and I realize it's highly degraded, we've all been out there and seen that, they are requiring us to build up. And so leveling any areas, doing any grading is probably not an option. And so we've drawn out a couple of options, a couple of shapes for a parking area at the end of Hover Road and around the corner from Hover Road. And these would be to accommodate a good number of cars and horse trailers. So it's not a small parking area. And inflation as part of the equation, of course, and just the cost of things, but because of the cost of the work, we got a couple of estimates back that kind of popped our eyes a little bit. And that was coinciding with this process, with this planning process. So we put the brakes on that a little bit and going to kind of reassess the situation and see if we can, based on the comments we received in this process and working with other folks, horse community and otherwise, see if we can do some reconfiguring of that parking lot, maybe have a discussion with the Corps of Engineers about things we need to do. So we've just paused that project and are reassessing a little bit where we're at. The desire is to put a proper parking area out there, but we have to have something that's feasible and just budgetarily doable. The other question was a question in regards to launching a kayak at Two Rivers and that's dangerous. So this has been a very interesting thing to watch unfold over the last few years at Two Rivers. Go back about 10 years ago, a business started up in the Tri-Cities called Northwest Paddleboarding, and their first year, one of the places that they wanted to do some paddleboarding was at Two Rivers in the Great Lagoon. Before that time, you would see occasional kayaks and paddleboards in that lagoon and in that area, but it wasn't really all that frequent. And largely because of the growth of that recreation and the work of Northwest Paddleboarding, of course, now Two Rivers is a hotspot for paddleboarding, especially, and also kayaking. So I think I recognize what the questioner is asking about. The place that people have started to launch is over at what we call central parking, or it's where the second location of the actual boat launch was on Finley Road. And some folks like that spot, but I recognize, as the commenter said, that it's not designed to be a paddlecraft launching point. We don't have any spot that was specifically designed for that. So I think that's a good comment. And I think given what we're seeing out there, we probably need to forthrightly develop an access into the water for people who are on foot with a paddleboard or a kayak. So I think that's a good comment. Let me just look here at the questions real quick before I make a couple other comments. It's easy to get behind on this. Someone it was asked, can we share these surveys with others who couldn't attend the meeting tonight? Please do, of course. And we will send out the link to this recording. We're at only about 28 minutes so far, so this isn't that long. And someone can watch this and then take the survey. We want participation. We want people to take the survey. Okay, yep, a question about trash at Two Rivers and Hover. including manpower. Can we get more manpower? Look, I've wanted more manpower in the park system for a lot of years. I think this plan will make recommendations about the financial side and the operations side. I think a lot of times these plans tend to be focused a little more on projects and programs and policy. And, you know, we kind of handle budget as we can here at the county. We've had the same staffing level for the Parks Department ever since I came to work for Benton County, which was in 1995. So it would be great to see a little bit of a bump there. The Parks Department does get some overlap and some assistance from the Facilities Department, and that's increased in recent years, but it would be great to see a little more manpower in the Parks Department. I recognize that. Question about historical signage. Yes, the question is, can we consult with Historical Society members and other such folks about that? Absolutely. No one in this office claims to be the experts on historic interpretation. In fact, the work that we've been doing at Badger and Candy Mountain in partnership with the Friends of Badger Mountain, that's been mostly in regards to geologic history and flora and fauna, and we've been enlisting well-known local experts on that. And when it comes to doing any other kind of historical or cultural interpretation, we've got contacts with the tribal nations to assist with that, and we're always looking for local experts in those fields. Probably the next place where something like that happen might be at Two Rivers. If we're able to work on that boardwalk project out there, that would include something. We want to work with the tribes on something out there. Inclusion of U.S. national bicycle route trails in Benton County, is this a possibility? Carl, I think so. Probably would talk with you a little more specifically offline about that. I think you got a lot more expertise in that than I do, but I'll be happy to touch base on that topic and integrate that with Mr. Beckwith. I don't see more questions popped up just at the minute, so I'm going to make a couple of other comments. As folks can see, for those who know or who don't know, for a county, a mid-sized county with 10 properties, we have a lot of variety in this park system, which is something that I think we're proud of and we think is pretty cool, but it also is a lot of challenge. It's a lot of expertise or manpower or whatever you want to call it to spread along a lot of places. We don't just do a bunch of football fields or a bunch of what we call city parks. I mean, we've got everything from that little Vista park you saw at the end, which is an acre of grass and a playground, which is pretty standard neighborhood park, all the way to the shooting facility, which we didn't talk about tonight, but you know, it's a 2,000 member, multiple discipline, regionally recognized facility out there at the base of Badger Mountain that we operate. And then of course the two mountain preserves, Two Rivers. I mean, there's a lot of variety here. We even have a pioneer cemetery. Okay, most folks don't realize that. So it's cool, but it's also challenging to have these many different types of properties to manage. Some other questions that I wonder about, get a little more into some of the policy items, and folks are encouraged to comment on these, but things like user conflicts that you might be experiencing. Most of the time I think of this being somewhere like Badger or Candy Mountain, where we are open to people walking, people riding bicycles, and people riding horses. So always interested to hear about people's experiences in those locations and elsewhere. Are you experiencing user conflict issues? Speaking again specifically of Badger and Candy, though this can also apply anywhere. Look, we've got people love their pets. Pets are very popular. We have an ongoing challenge with dogs at Badger and Candy Mountain. We've got folks that just don't think leash rules apply to them. And we've got people that think that the bags for poop are intended for you to pick up your poop and then leave it on the trail in a bag. I've noticed this doesn't just apply to Badger and Candy Mountain, though. I see it everywhere I go in the country. So, you know, we're coming to a point where we're going to have, I think, a stronger reckoning with the canine issue at these two properties. And so, you know, if folks want to comment on that, we'd like to see those comments. The final other point I was going to make. Mr. Beckwith touched on several items that would be kind of related to safety. And we'd like to get people's comments on those and other types of safety issues. That's always the number one thing, right? So the best things that we can do for safety. When Horn Rapids Park came up and was discussed, a reference was made, I believe it was the number one item, to the Wannawish Dam area. We had another fatality at Wannawish Dam this year. By we, I mean the community. It wasn't the county's thing, but the community had a fatality, and that's at least from the records we have, the fourth fatality associated with that dam since it was rebuilt in 1997. There's a few other parties to this that are probably a little more to the point than Benton County, but we've been having a hard time getting those parties particularly interested in the topic. So we're looking and working with partners like the Taptail Greenway and Columbia Basin Dive Rescue and others at some things we can do at that location to help with this issue, so that we don't have people going over that dam on a paddleboard or a kayak and losing their life. It was also mentioned the railroad crossing coming in from the north to Hover Park. More trains, faster trains, longer trains. Any of you have been out there and have crossed those railroad tracks and then had a train come along, it's going to be quite startling. And there have been episodes out there. There has been train on vehicle collisions. So we hope that that will be recognized in this process. And I think we're going to make a priority of trying to work with the railroad on at least getting a signaled and armed crossing out there. And then also at Hover Park, a mention was made of that wasteway, which is not intended to be a mud hole. That is a wasteway for irrigation district, but again, it's a situation where we're having a hard time getting the other parties that are a party to this particularly interested in the issue, those being Kennewick Irrigation District and the Army Corps of Engineers. The only one that seems to be having much interest in dealing with crossing that and the degradation and the damage coming from it is Benton County. So we'll be interested to see if other folks have comments on that. I'm going to take another look at the questions here. You know, encouragement to seek better and more budget. Yep, I agree with that. Okay, a question about downhill mountain bike trails. You know, this has come up a few times over the years. We do have some hill areas in the Tri-Cities. It's the State Patrol area is mentioned here in the comment. Yeah, what we do not have in the current parks are what I think the mountain bike community would really like, which would be some dedicated single track and including some elevation. Look, Benton and Badger and Candy Mountain, their location, the viewpoints are extremely popular. From day one, those have been multi-use properties with multi-use trails. And the direction of us has been consistently that we're going to keep it that way. So those two properties are probably not the place that those dedicated mountain bike trails are going to happen, but it would depend on what the public wants. But what would really be great is to find some other locations similar to the existing State Patrol location to do those kinds of things. So that might take a little more of a movement in the community in partnership with the county to kind of identify such a place. Comment, barbed wire along Hover Park, you know, yeah. I mean, look, Hover's got a lot of challenges. I mean, barbed wire just being one of them. So being frank here about it, we've got 8, 9, 10 properties over the years, whatever the number's been, and Hover has always been the farthest back on the stove. And so I think the park board, if I was to try to represent their thinking of recent years, is they want to change that. They want to find out how we can make use of that property so that it's something more and better than just renegade use. And so safety is a concern there, as this commenter points out, and just finding ways to start to slow down the degradation and find find good uses for Hover Park and make that something that maybe it never becomes a jewel in the crown, but at least it's something that we can be proud of and be working on and improving. Railroad crossing at Hover be paid for by the county or the railroad or both? Well, I tell you what, getting the railroad to even participate in anything, let alone pay for it's a challenge. You know, a signal and an arm on it. Not sure what those kinds of things cost and what kind of upkeep they take, but I kind of look at it as one of those things where, you know, I can't speak for what the county's going to do, but at some point this has to be important enough for someone to just do what needs to be done. And if I think we're going to have our folks here, our capital folks, our procurement folks, facilities folks start taking a look at this. And we've got a few people on staff that have some experience working with the railroad. And I think that it's a high time to start looking at this issue. And I think that the final plan here will support that. Comment on bike trails and folks in the community, lack of trails. Yeah, these good comment. And Candy Mountain, Badger and Candy, unsafe for mountain bikers with hikers and dogs. So yeah, that's a classic user conflict comment there. And I know certain folks, both who ride, whether they ride horse or they ride bike, you know, more of those folks are not riding at Candy and Mountain and Badger as much anymore for that kind of a reason. I mean, the resources are popular and it's just harder to ride a mountain bike or a horse at those two places. You're just constantly running over people. So we need to find places for mountain bikers. Like I mentioned earlier, and I think some other folks here on the open house are agreeing, what would be great is a dedicated mountain bike area. That's one thing we could use. I mean, trails throughout the community would be great, but a spot that was where mountain bikes was the primary use, I think that would be great. Yeah, another comment to that effect. Question about getting access to KID and CID canals. Mr. Beckwith might have more expertise in this area. You know, in some places in the country, irrigation districts are loosening up to this a bit more. There's some communities where I don't know about encouraged, but irrigation district roads are very much a part of the network. That's been slower to evolve here. You know, it kind of flies in the face of what happens on the ground. I know that back years ago when I was a long distance runner, I loved running those canals. If you want something flat with a decent base to run on, some gravel, and you're not looking for hills on that day, and you want long stretches, we can accumulate miles. Irrigation district canals and the roads are fantastic. So I think we just need to work with our local districts on that. Their concern is liability, right? I mean, we're in a litigious world today, and that's what their concern is. Comment about Hover. Let's see, decent trails in the general area. You know, we've got one of the things about Badger and Candy Mountain, and this is what comes when you have a great stewardship partner like the Friends of Badger Mountain, is we have a very high quality of trail construction, design, construction, and maintenance on those two properties for soft surface trails. And you're just not going to get that everywhere unless you get more groups like that can do it. But Friends of Badger's, you know, stretched pretty thin. I mean, that we've got about 10 miles of improved trail, and that stands up to 300,000 people a year on those trails. So I mean, it's a challenge, and so it drops off pretty quickly when you're talking about the kind of landscape we have around here. And if you have trails that aren't maintained, aren't built and aren't maintained, they can degrade quickly. Mountain bike community want to build trails. I know some of those people. We've got some great folks in the mountain bike community. Access right away to the park properties at Wallula Gap. Okay, well, we may as well answer that. Wallula is a challenging situation. The map that was put up shows the 4 parcels that are discontiguous, and actually there is not legal access to any of them by land. You have to reach them by water. but the properties are somewhat connected to existing scattered Corps of Engineer properties in that area. We've had the luxury of benign trespass in Wallula Gap for many years, but ownerships are changing, and not everyone is on board with that. One of the things the county is looking at is either entire purchase, partial purchase, or at least a recreational access easement over some property at the end of Ayers Road that would help with some of that connectivity. But it's a challenge down there to link all of those properties up. So to just answer that question straight, is there an access right away to the park properties in Wallula Gap? The answer is no. More trails. Spokane has a good example of mountain biking trails. Yes, as does Wenatchee. I mean, a lot of communities do. Plan, address, additional property acquisition. Yes. Certainly a part of a forward-looking plan is to add acreage. If you're going to add people, we want to look to add acreage. There's different ways to do that. This plan is specifically a 6-year plan, 3 state budget biennia, but we're also taking a longer term look, a 10-20 year look. The effort is to try to do these plans every 6 years. We're a little bit behind. We're about 7.5 years currently, but yes, we should be looking. Should the plan address additional property acquisition? Yes. Heavier emphasis development farther from the Tri-Cities to attract people to the rest of the county. That's a good comment. Partnership to be developed to build single track. Yeah, I mean, it's a good comment there from Julie. A lot of these things just take a certain kind of energy. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but Friends of Badger was kind of a shooting star for us, or just a moment in time. You had a group of folks. I don't want to try to tell their story for them, but folks used to hike up on Badger Mountain all the time. It was all private property. One day the owner said, nope, not going to do that anymore, or at least not on the route that people were taking. And so a group coalesced around that and said, wow, I mean, we need to do something about this. And nearly 20 years later now, we've got these 2 preserves at over 870 acres. And Friends of Badger is doing more work in the city of Richland and really trying to connect with Little Badger. I've worked with those folks for a long time. There's a tremendous amount of effort, of time, of politicking, of diplomacy, and of fundraising to make all those things happen, especially now because it's getting harder and the property is getting more expensive. So, I mean, I think that's what it takes. It just takes a critical mass of some of those interest groups and individuals. And it always helps to have a few angel donors out there, or find some other opportunity where there's a grant or something, and then you go for it. I think Benton County has proven to be a partner in these things to the extent that we can. I mean, we took on Badger and Candy Mountain, and people in the day thought we wouldn't do that. See here, Shrub Step Trails Alliance. Yep, I think shout out to the Shrub Step Trails Alliance. Look them up. Yeah, several more comments here about mountain bike community. I mean, Shrub Step Trails Alliance, Chinook Cycling Club, Friends of Badger can probably be a good reference point, if not a direct partner. I mean, I think there's different folks in the community that want to do these things. And I will say, I've had a current county commissioner talk about taking his sons out there to the state patrol area and being aware that area is under threat and going to be reduced. And he's shown an effort and wanting to, how do we preserve some of this? Where do we get some property? So look, you got a county commissioner who's interested in the topic. Okay, these are some good comments. We're going to capture these. I think, Tom, you're seeing these and the kinds of things people want to see reflected in the work ahead.
Sure. We're going to take your comments, and over the next month, we'll develop schematics for some of the park improvements that we find are high priorities. We'll break everything down into the tasks that are necessary over the next 6 and 20 years to realize what's in this plan. We'll look at who's going to do what. And I think that you'll find that there are going to be a lot of potential public agencies as well as nonprofit groups that could be tasked to do some of these tasks, to do some of this work. It's not all going to be possible to be done by the county. We'll develop costs for what those are, and then we'll develop some financing strategies for that. And in November, we'll come back with another open house to show you what the conclusions of those are, and ask you the same kind of comments about the different ways how these could be done and how these could be financed. So that open house will be probably the second, third week in November. That date will be also announced to you the same fashion as we did this one.
And we're going to improve on Mr. Beckwith's audio so you can hear him better.
I'll work on my voice.
Question about how can we get more people to complete the survey? I don't want my communications person to bombard the email list that was generated from the first survey. You've received 3 emails in the last week. We're not going to abuse that, but we'll push it pretty hard on our social media. And those of you that are in or representing interest groups or your own networks, I mean, that's the best way to do it. So if you're in one of the clubs and you have some social media or email lists, that's a good way to do it. Give us a couple of days here. Hopefully this recording works, and we'll have a link to this meeting. So we're coming up on about 50 minutes here. This isn't too onerous. We'll be done in under an hour, and we'll get that link out to folks. And then you can also have, we'll have this PowerPoint available, and we'll have the survey available. So I'll work with Tom. We'll get that packaged up, and that'll be available for folks, for the next several weeks. Let me just see a few more comments here. Directly address integration with the other municipalities. Yeah, I think I know where Fred's going with that. We've got some examples of some cooperation. I think Badger Mountain's one of those. Most people don't realize, or many people don't realize, that when you pull up there down at Trailhead Park and you go up the mountain, you're beginning at a City of Richland Park. We've always had a partnership with them there. So Trailhead Park is City of Richland. Then when you're hiking the hill, you cross into the county property, and we're going to have that again over along the ridge line. There was talk a couple of times over the decades about a metropolitan park district. I don't know, Tri-Cities is interesting. Sometimes people like to partner up, and other times people are very parochial and, this is mine and don't touch what's mine. So sometimes integration and cooperation is easy, and sometimes not so much. Yeah, I think there's a pretty good final comment there. I hope folks have appreciated this format tonight. Like I said a little bit sarcastically, but also in truth at the top of it, I doubt we'd have had 40 people in a room tonight. I mean, I've done some of these over the years, and it's just folks are much more apt to hang out in their pajamas at home and with their beverage of choice and participate this way than to go out into the night. So I know, Tom, this is kind of a thing you've done a few times, we've been experimenting with. I think it's worked well. And as long as we can get the technology to hold up, it seems to be pretty well. So I'm assuming this is what we'll do in November. To what extent do the impact of these plans take native wildlife into account is another question here toward the end. Well, I hope that at least from the park side, folks would think that the county's had a pretty good a reputation in trying to have conservation be a piece of these. Most of the county parks are large acreage undeveloped properties. Badger, Candy, most of Horn Rapids, even Two Rivers has a significant nature area component. So I mean, Native Plant Society is one of our partners. We work with folks that do the bat surveys. We work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We cooperate with the Hanford site. I mean, I think Benton County's, hopefully in regards to its parks, has a pretty good reputation for trying to account for geologic history, wildlife, habitat. I don't know of any of the city park departments that commonly do restoration and buy sagebrush by the hundreds and plant them. So I think our reputation is pretty good. Yeah, good comment there from Fred at the end. Tom, I'm gonna have you maybe any last words, because we just hang around here. You know, we're gonna get all kinds of stuff forever. We'll try to cut it off here in a few minutes.
We will take your chat questions and post those for everyone to look at as well. And we'll probably start posting some progress reports to give you some idea of the field assessments, the results of the last survey, and so on. So stay tuned.
I'll just add to that. I'm assuming that everybody on the call here at this point is someone who most of these folks are probably folks who are on our email list. If you want to be on that list and you don't think you are already, send it to parks@co.benton.wa.us, or you can send it to my name. Some of you have, I mean, I recognize a lot of people on the call tonight. You can send something to me. And we won't abuse that email list, but if you want to know what's going on, then I mean, we're going to send it out. We're going to use that email list we've generated. One person has asked to be taken off. I think after they got the second email in 2 days, maybe they said, okay, that's not for me. But we'll publicize on the Facebook page. We'll publicize on the website, and we'll use that email list, and we'll just use it for essential communication. So that will be the best way to know what's going on. There we go. So Jennifer posted a couple of emails. I would prefer you use the parks one, but you can use mine as well. Okay. I think I agree with Cindy F. I think this went very well. I do as well. It is 6:59. Tom, unless you have anything more, I think we're going to shut it down. Shut it down, baby. All right. Thank you, everyone. Watch for some information on the recorded version of this in the next couple of days, and go take your survey. And with that, good night. Tom and Jennifer, maybe we'll hang around for a couple of minutes or recap in a separate meeting.
Okay.
Let me wet my whistle here. Well, Tom, I thought it went pretty well.
I did too. You got 40 people. That's actually very good.
I think so.
Not
I mean,
disappointed at all.
yeah.
As you said, it's certainly better than trying to do this in person.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, you know me, I was a little worried about the technology, and yeah, we can still hear you though. I mean, it's not optimum. If you were coming through the actual microphone, it would be better, but we made it work. So, yeah, I thought that was good.
I have some guys going to take a look at our systems tomorrow, so hopefully I can get this fixed soon.
Yeah, right on. So look, we'll figure out. Well, let me turn the recording off. How do we do that? Stop recording. Yes. Do you want to stop recording?